Hi! Before we start the video, I wanted to let you all know that a new chapter of my webcomic has been posted to my webcomic channel. Link in the description. Okay, now on to the video. Hello everyone! In this week's video, I'm drawing 4 of my viewers' original characters. So, this week was kind of a different week. I had a plan for this video, but then during the creation process, something happened that kind of messed things up. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So usually I only draw 2 of my viewers' characters because that's all I have time for. But this time, when I was looking through all of the submissions, I found a few different characters that I thought would be fun to draw as chibis. Chibis don't take as long for me to draw, so I can draw more of them. So 3 out of the 4 characters I'll be drawing today will be chibi characters. This first character was created by J1San. The character's name is Daria Altaloon. Daria is a scientist from the future. She likes experimenting and creating new things. Eve is her robot friend. I've actually seen this OC submitted a couple times, and each time I've always wanted to draw her because I think she's really cute. I love her little robot friend. I always love little companion-like characters that are cute. I should make a character with one someday. I always kind of want a character with a cute little companion. So for this chibi drawing, I drew Daria holding Eve, and for the background I'll keep things simple by kind of encasing things in a colored square as a way to help things feel more finished. I'm going to be drawing the illustrations on my iPad using the app ibisPaint X. I was thinking to draw in Procreate because many of you have been requesting I draw in it. I did try to draw in it for a little bit, but for some reason I always have a hard time doing line art in Procreate, and I was having a hard time finding a brush I wanted to use. So after about 20 minutes of trying to use Procreate, I went back to ibisPaint X. I've mentioned this before, but ibisPaint behaves much more like Clip Studio Paint, so I tend to prefer it over Procreate. However, Procreate is a really amazing app. I just need to take the time to find brushes and a process that works for me in it. For the line art of all the chibis, I'm using the pencil number 2 brush. For some reason, whenever I use ibisPaint, I get a lot of comments asking about what brushes I'm using, so I'll try my best to mention each one that I use. I'll also try to remember to list them in the description. So during the start of this video, I mentioned that the creation process for this video didn't go as planned. You see, I was planning to color all these illustrations in this video traditionally with things like color pencils, watercolors, acrylic paints, and so on. I was going to color them traditionally because the company sent me art supplies to try out, but the art supplies were kind of terrible. I'll continue this topic in a moment, but first I want to finish talking about Daria. For the coloring, I kept it very simple. I add a bit of cell shading in some areas and add highlights in the hair. To make the shading feel a bit more fancy, I did add some gradients. I added a light gradient on the top of the picture and a darker gradient on the bottom of the picture. I always find adding gradients can help simple shading feel a lot more fancy than it really is. So here is my drawing of Daria and Eve. Thank you so much to J1San for letting me draw them. They are both so cute. The creator of this character didn't want me to say their name, so I won't say their name. But the name of their character is Lem. Lem's exact age is unknown. However, she behaves like a young child. Lem takes interest in most anything, and often enjoys pondering at the simplest objects one might come across. When I saw Lem, I really wanted to draw her because I thought she was really adorable, and I just really like how the artist captures her personality. I think it's really cute. I love the drawing where she's amazed by the burger. So for my chibi drawing, I decided to draw her being amazed at a burger. Also, this time we are kind of speeding through the line art process, and I'll be showing more slow footage for the coloring. So kind of the reverse of the last drawing. So back to the bad art supplies. When I was prepping for the video, I had sketched out all of my drawings in Clip Studio Paint. Once they were all sketched, I printed them out, and next I was going to transfer my sketches to different paper, like mixed media paper, watercolor paper, and so on. That way I could color them traditionally. But then I had the thought, before I take the time to transfer my drawings, I should test out the supplies the company sent me, just to make sure I like them. And I'm really glad I did that. So I got all the supplies ready and my recording equipment set up, and I started to test the supplies, and yeah, they were pretty bad. Basically, it's like the company sent me art supplies that were made for like little kids to play around with. The watercolors were super chalky, the acrylic paint was super transparent, and the watercolor pencils didn't activate the nicest with water and they just kind of felt dry. So yeah. The only good thing about the art set was the sketchbooks that came with it. The sketchbooks were nice, but basically I didn't want to recommend the supplies to all of you because I thought they weren't very good quality. Plus, I didn't want to torture myself by trying to make finished illustrations with those supplies. So I contacted the company to let them know that I was not happy with the supplies and that I couldn't make a video on them. The company was super nice about it. They actually said that the kit was made by a different manufacturer and that they were going to look into improving the supplies based on what I told them. That's one of the reasons I'm not naming the company, because I want to give them a chance to improve. The second reason is that the company does make other good art supplies. It's just this kit did not match the usual quality. And thirdly, I kind of should have known. The kit kind of looks like it's made for kids, and it performs like it's made for kids. Anyways, let's talk a bit more about Lem. I had a lot of fun drawing her and the burger. I don't draw food very much, so it was fun including that. Also, I hope it's okay I gave her eyebrows. In the original art, she doesn't have eyebrows, and I wasn't going to add the eyebrows, but with the way I draw my chibis, the forehead feels very empty without the eyebrows. So I decided to add them. I hope that's okay. I also wasn't totally sure how I should stylize the face. The original art kind of gives me Adventure Time vibes, so I wasn't sure if I should make the chibi look a more Adventure Timey or be more my style. I decided to go with a little bit more my style, but I did keep the eyes kind of simple, and I kind of tried to keep the original charm of the character in my chibi, I suppose. So here is Chibi Lem. Thank you so much to the creator of Lem for letting me draw her. She is so adorable. The third character I'll be drawing as a chibi was created by Sakura. The character's name is Hayashi Izumi. He likes food, video games, basketball, and frogs. He dislikes losing and school. I really like his design and his color scheme. I think it's really neat, and I thought it might be fun to draw him as a chibi. Because I was going to color all the illustrations in this video traditionally, I kept them all pretty simple because when it comes to traditional coloring, I'm not as confident. That's partially why I decided to draw chibis. Like I mentioned earlier, the last character I'll be drawing will not be chibi, but the composition overall is still pretty simple. So yeah, because I wasn't able to use the supplies that were sent to me, I decided to instead draw on my iPad. Many of you have been wanting to see me draw on my iPad again. Plus, a lot of times I do draw simpler illustrations on my iPad because I'm not as comfortable or used to it. So these pictures that I drew worked really well for being finished on my iPad. I was considering still coloring the pictures with traditional art supplies. I would just use supplies that I have instead of the ones that were sent to me. But after dealing with the supplies not working as I expected, and talking with the company, and taking down and setting up my recording equipment and all that stuff, I felt like I wasn't mentally ready to work on these illustrations traditionally. I always find traditional art to be more stressful, so that's why I often prefer digital. And I kind of felt like I just wanted to chill out and draw some digital pictures. I hope the creators of the characters aren't too disappointed that I drew their characters as chibis. I hope they like them. I had a lot of fun drawing them. It was fun drawing cute little chibis and it was something different. But I would understand if maybe they were a little disappointed of getting a chibi instead of a full illustration. But I really like drawing the chibis. One thing I did do for all of the illustrations is that I would change the line art color to help things feel soft. To do this, I would clip a layer to my line art layer and then go over the different parts of the line art with different colors. Like for the hair and skin areas, I used more of a brown, but for the hoodie, I used more of a green. After applying the color, I lower the opacity so the line art is kind of dark, but still has a hint of the color to it. I always find it interesting how much line art color can change the feeling of an illustration. So here is Hayashi and the other chibis. I like how they all kind of match and make a set. Also, thank you so much Sakura for letting me draw him. Like I mentioned, the next character I'm drawing won't be a chibi drawing. I'll be drawing a full illustration of this character. And the character I'll be drawing was created by Ash. His name is Kai and he is 16. He is a very quiet person and doesn't have many friends. He is also very smart but doesn't show it. So this is the footage of when I was sketching in Clip Studio Paint. Like I mentioned, I originally did all the sketching on there. I really liked the composition of Ash's original picture. I thought it was so neat and I wanted to draw it in my style. So like the original drawing, I'll have Ash turned and have the moon behind him. I did change up the pose a bit. His body is in side view and his head is turning and tilting to look over at us. After my sketch is done, I brought it onto my iPad and I'm doing the line art on there. For the cheapies, I used the pencil number 2 brush for the line art because I liked how soft it was. However, this time around, I wanted a brush that was more opaque and not as soft because I was going to be dealing with a lot of dark colors. So for the line art this time, I'm using the Dip Pen soft brush. I tend to prefer this tool a lot of the time. I'll use it for cell shading, line art, and for most general use. One thing I came to notice while working on the line art this time around is that the setting Force Fade can be really helpful. On my iPad, I sometimes find it hard to get lines that taper nicely, and my lines will look a bit chunky, I guess. But I turned on Force Fade while I was working on the hair because I wanted my lines to taper more, and it really helped a lot. I mostly had the line set to fade at the end of the stroke. In some cases, I did make it fade on both sides. It also felt like Force Fade made my lines feel a bit more stable. I know some of you have mentioned in the comments of my videos that Force Fade can help with that, so thanks for letting me know. Force Fade does really help a lot. I did still turn it off for a lot of the different parts. I mostly just used it kind of for the hair. After the line art, I filled in the base colors. Also, when I was doing the line art, I didn't outline his scar. I was going to add it when I added the base colors, but I forgot. Thankfully, I remember it later. When I was coloring his face, I kept being like, I feel like something's missing on his face, but I don't know what. And then I was like, oh wait, his scar. So now it's time for shading. Also, the sky is a light blue at the moment because my camera did not like the contrast between the dark sky and the moon. Whenever I record myself using my iPad, I get comments of people telling me I could just use the screen recorder instead. I do know there's a screen recorder, it's just I like showing all of you a different view of the creation process. When I draw in Clip Studio Paint on my computer, I can't show you this view. So when I record on my iPad, I feel like it's nice to change things up and show you all something a bit different. However, later we will be switching to screen recorded footage because like I said, my camera doesn't like the contrast between the dark and light colors. So right now I'm shading the character pretty normally. My plan was to shade like it's normal lighting and then go over the color later with effect layers and filters to make the colors look like it's in a dark area being moonlit. And honestly, this usually kind of works, but I should have picked cooler shading colors. I did apply layers set to multiply later on and use filters, but my colors still end up being kind of too warm. But I will fix that and I'll explain that when I get to it. One part that was very tricky for me was shading the clothing folds. When I do this in Clip Studio Paint, I heavily rely on the blending tool. And ibisPaint has a blending tool, but it doesn't behave the same as the one in Clip Studio Paint. So I was having a really hard time shading the clothes. I kept using a bunch of different tools and brushes and just trying to get the same look that I usually do in Clip Studio Paint in a kind of very roundabout way. Next up was the hair. Kai's hair is white on top and black on bottom. For the white part, I used a lot of light blue, almost a periwinkle kind of color for the shading. A lot of you ask me how I shade white hair and black hair, so I'll try to share some tips right here. When it comes to white hair for shading, I try to include colors that are in the picture. If the picture is more blue, I'll use a light blue for the shading, and if a picture is pinkier, I'll use more pink colors. So basically whatever color is mostly in a picture, I'll kind of apply that to the hair. Also, instead of focusing on highlights, I focus more on shading. So a lot of times where I usually add a band of highlight to help show the form of the hair, I add a band of shading instead. So for black hair, it's kind of the opposite. I add some shading, but I define a lot of the shape of the hair with highlights. You won't see me adding highlights in this footage right here. I'll be adding them later on. Anyways, for black hair, I focus more on adding lighter colors. Like with what I do for the white, I try to incorporate colors that are in the picture. Like if there is more blues, I add some more bluish highlights to the hair. Or if the picture is more purpley, I'll add more purpley highlights. However, I usually keep the color pretty subtle and muted. That way the color still looks black or still looks white. When shading white and black hair, I try to avoid using only whites, grays, and blacks for the shading because things will often look really dull if you do that. It helps a lot to add a bit of color to your shading or even just a tish of color to the base color. Like if a character has white hair but the picture has a bunch of green, maybe add just a hint of green to the white. The same goes for black. So I hope this helps a bit to those of you who have been asking how I shade white and black hair. In this case, I wasn't totally confident when I was shading the hair, so it's very simple right now. But I'll make it more detailed later on. Kai's eyes were very fun to shade. He has one blue eye and one gold eye. Also, I tried something a bit different. Recently, I like to add a highlight to the top of the eye that's set to a really low opacity. And the color matches the color of the eye. I usually have this be an oval kind of shape, but this time I tried erasing lines within the highlight. I sometimes see people do this and wanted to give it a try. I feel like it looks kind of neat and kind of gives it a different look. So now I'm on to making the lighting look more nighttimey, and I'll also be finishing up the background. I put all my layers into a folder, clipped a layer to the folder, and set it to multiply. I then go over all of my coloring with a dark blue and lower the opacity. This will make the character look like they're kinda in shadow. I then go around the edge of Kai with white to add rim lighting since the moon is the light source and it is behind him. For the background, I found a light texture that has some particles in it and I applied it to the background just to add some interest. Then I painted in a bunch of different colors with the trapezoid airbrush. I think that's what it's called. I used a lot of blacks, blues, purples, and just kind of mixed them all together. And then I threw in a whole bunch of dots to make stars. I kept applying Gaussian blur to the dots to make the stars look kind of glowy. Then I add some splotches of blue to the moon and did some finishing touches like highlights. Oh, also, I found another texture and added it to the sky just to make it feel more interesting. I really lowered the opacity and blurred it out some with Gaussian blur, so it's not super noticeable, but it's kinda there. So at this point, I felt like the picture was done, but then when I took a break and later looked at it on my PC, I felt like it wasn't quite how I wanted, and I noticed that I forgot the scar. So I decided to bring the picture into Clip Studio Paint to fix it up a bit. Like I mentioned earlier, I felt like the shading was a bit warm and I wanted the hair to have more detail, so I added in his scar. I also made the shading more bluey by applying a blue to all of the skin shading, and I also used a color balance filter just to overall make all the colors look a little bit more blue. ibisPaint does have a color balance feature, but it doesn't quite work the same as the Clip Studio Paint one. So I used the Clip Studio Paint one to make it look more how I wanted it to. But right now I'm going in with a bunch of different colors and highlights just to make the hair feel more interesting and more detailed. I probably could have done this on my iPad, but I felt way more comfortable doing this in Clip Studio Paint because it has all the brushes that I'm used to, and Clip Studio Paint is my main program. So I'm able to do things much faster and easier in it. And plus I have things like the blending tool that I use quite a bit. I'm definitely glad I decided to add these extra details and finishing touches. I feel like it brought the picture to more how I wanted it to be. So here's the finished picture. I hope you like it, Ash. The background and lighting was a lot of fun to work with and your character is really cool. Thank you so much to all of you that submit your characters for me to draw. I always love seeing all of your characters and I'm honored that you want me to draw them. Before we end, I want to say thank you to my super amazing, wonderful patrons over on Patreon for supporting my work and what I do. It means so much to me. And thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye!